This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
Which brings us to the fifth point, which is verse 44. Jesus gets, Lazarus walks out, and he's all bound up, has all the linen strips and everything all over, and he has the covering on his face, and Jesus says, loose him. And here's the fifth thing: move with your miracle. Move with your miracle. This could also be called live with anticipation. This is normally the brick wall that so many of us hit when we're seeking God's will. We've done everything that we believe we're supposed to do. We're trusting God, but we have no expectations or plans for when God actually moves. We've done everything that we think we're supposed to do. We're ready, but we hit this brick wall because we have no expectations or plans for when God actually moves. I love the story that's told of the little country church. Having pastored a little country church, I could see this happening. And they were in a severe drought. And so the pastor called all the people and he said, we're going to have a prayer meeting and pray for rain on Wednesday night. Y'all come. So they all showed up. When they all showed up, the pastor stood up and he said, no, we're not ready. Let's go home. And they went, what do you mean we're not ready? He said, no, let's go home. We'll call another meeting when it's time to pray. And so they all went home, and they were like, what was that all about? You know. A few weeks later, the pastor called another prayer meeting. They all showed up on Wednesday night. Pastor stood up. He looked them over and he said, we're not ready. Let's go home. And they were like getting pretty irritated about this. And after about 3 or 4 times of this, people were just ready to string the pastor up. And some of those old farmer deacons cornered him one day. And they said, you've called us to pray about the drought. Our crops are drying up, and we're supposed to be praying about this. And you call us, and then when we show up to pray, you don't. You send us home. What's going on? And the pastor said, you're not ready to pray. You're not ready to pray. And they said, what do you mean we're not ready to pray? We're showing up to pray. And he said, none of you brought your umbrellas. When you know that God is up to something, you need to plan ahead to move with your miracle. What's it going to take? What are the possibilities? And when God moves, what do you do then? God made us a very, very specific promise. And an example of that is in Malachi. Now in Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, it talks about the tithes. Bring the tithes into the storehouse and so on and so on, and put me to the test. But the principle of this verse is really what I want us to focus in on. The principle of the verse is this: and test me, if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need. God was saying, move with your miracle. Get ready. Because when you do things my way and you trust me to bring new life into your life, I will do that, and you need to be ready to move with your miracle. You need to be ready that God is going to do something, that He's going to accomplish something that He wants to accomplish. We need to discover this key element. When God promises that He's going to do something, we need to be ready to act on that promise. We need to be ready to move with the miracle. Now, let's break that down so we can understand it. Here's the passage, John 11:44. The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, the people around him, unbind him and let him go. Now I want you to see 3 things in this as we close. What did Lazarus need? Why did Lazarus need to be unbound? Well, I mean, obviously, there are, he kind of like, he had his grave clothes on him, right? Of course he needed to be unbound. But why is this mentioned in the Bible? I mean, why is this element of the story there? Didn't need to be there. I mean, this miracle that accomplished, he came out of the grave. He came walking out of the grave. Why that little element of the story? Why is that there? Why did God put that in there? What's the application of that? Well, here's what I think it is. 3 things that had to happen for Lazarus and have to happen for us. Number 1, he needed to be unfettered to the past. He needed to be unfettered to the past. Now, that doesn't mean that he would not remember his past, but he did need to move beyond his past. He needed to move beyond his past. We don't need to ignore the past, but we do need to move past it. We don't need to ignore the past, but we do need to move past it. But notice something else about Lazarus' condition. Not only did he need to be unfettered to the past, he needed to be released from the present. The problem so many of us have is that our present circumstances are the result of our past. So not only do we have to be unfettered to the past, we need to be released from the present. We're still caught up in something that happened back then. And so we're caught up in the past, and we're also bound by the present. This is the result of it. I'm going through the circumstances or the consequences of the past. And we have to be released from the past and the present in order to be able to move on. Which brings us to the third point, and that is that Lazarus needed to step into his future. And so do you. He needed to step into his future. We would have thought Lazarus was plumb nuts if he had said, when Jesus said, loose him, unbind him, if Lazarus had said, no, it's okay, I'll figure it out. I got this. I mean, after all, I got a brain, and, you've done enough, God. I mean, you raised me from the dead. I can certainly take my own strips of cloth off. I mean, at least I can pull this thing off of my head so I can see what's going on. No, I got it, God. It's okay. Once I get through this, I'll start serving you. But for right now, I just need to focus on this. We would have thought he was nuts. Well, we do the same thing. God says, I want to free you. I'm going to call you out from that life that you've been living that isn't complete. I want you to live again. I want you to be unfettered to your past, released from your present, and I want you to step into your future. And we go, okay, I'll take it from here. And we think that because we're free from the grave, now we're back in control. That we're in charge. That we got it. Okay, I got through that little hurdle. I got raised from the dead. I got it now. Can you imagine if you had been raised from the dead? If when Lazarus was raised from the dead, if he had said, thanks, Jesus, I'll take it from here. And yet, that's exactly what we do when God moves in our lives. Sometimes we just simply decide, okay, I got it from here. I'll take it from here. Listen, God's given us new life, and we're happy to have a new life, but sometimes we think that it's up to us to take over and work it out for ourselves. Nonsense. If God raised Lazarus from the dead, don't you think God had a purpose and a plan for Lazarus? I mean, doesn't that make sense that, I guess maybe we should come up with something for Lazarus to do now that I've raised him from the dead? You think that's the way God thinks? God had a purpose and a plan all along. If that verse is true that we saw earlier, that God had a purpose from before the foundation of the ages, if he had a purpose and a plan, and Lazarus' purpose and plan was being implemented at that point, don't you think God had a purpose and a plan for Lazarus after he lived again? God has a purpose and a plan for you also after you live again. He's got a plan. It's not just to live again, it's to live again to whatever it is that God wants. God has a plan. If he raised you from being eternally separated from God, if he raised you from the dead, spiritually being dead, don't you think he also has a purpose and a plan for your life? And if that gets sidetracked somewhere along the way and you feel yourself trapped and you're caught in a cave and there are these obstacles in front of you that you can't get around and God removes them and he releases you and you're unfettered from your past, you're released from your present, it's time to step in your future, don't you think that God has a purpose and a plan in doing all of that in your life, just like he did with Lazarus? The answer, of course, is yes. And he's ready to unbind you so that you can move on with your life. Today, God is saying, unbind him, unbind her, and let him go, let her go. God is saying the same thing today. He's saying the same thing about you today. The very thing that he said about Lazarus, he's also saying about you. Today, God is saying, I'm up to something in your life. But you can't take that next step until you've let go of the past and been released of the present. So how do you do that? Well, let me give you those 5 steps again. Remove the obstacles. Expect negative circumstances. Focus on the glory of God. Pull the trigger. And move with your miracle. Let's pray.
On behalf of Dan Hurst and the Open Class, we want to thank you for watching. We hope it was a blessing.